Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Doring, and this is ZoomTrak. Welcome again to a Saturday afternoon edition of ZoomTrak by NRail. NRail is the organization promoting N-scale model railroading. That's NTRAK and T-TRAK, Primo N, home layouts, club layouts, no layouts. It's all good as long as it's in the normal scale. We again have a good program for you this afternoon. We're going to start with Terry talking about T-TRAK. Then Lee will help finish up the Farragut loop, Fremo N-scale modules, talking about scenery today. And then we have Robert Utley with us to talk about NTRAK 2.0 revisited. But before we get started with that, Bruce, I think you wanted to mention something, so go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to mention that in 2 weeks, there will be the Oklahoma City train show at the fairgrounds. I know some of you on board will be coming up for that. If you're in Texas, we're real close. We're only 3 hours away from Dallas, and we're not that far away from Kansas City either. So it's a 2-day show. We'll have lots of NTRAK and Fremo. I'm not sure Fremo N is going to be there, but T-TRAK will be there, 1TRAK, NTRAK, and there will be at least 2 or 3 N-scale layouts there, as well as all the other scales and lots of dealers. So it's Oklahoma City the first weekend in November. And that's all I have.
All right, fantastic. If you can make it, please do. All right. First up on the program, I think we have a pre-recorded video as normal with Terry talking T-TRAK.
Welcome to Talkin' T-TRAK. This time we're going to be doing some yard work. This is the beginning of a multi-part series about T-TRAK yards. I'll start by introducing my 8-TRAK yard. True North Rail needed a yard for the trains to play in. This is what resulted. Anybody know what these are? 8-TRAK tapes. The first portable music medium before cassette tapes, CDs, and MP4 players. But these are not the 8-TRAKs I'll talk about. These are the 8-TRAKs I'll talk about. And then some, since we are here to talk about yards, train yards. The original idea for the 8-TRAK yard was a 12-foot length comprised of 2 3-foot yard ladders and 3 double modules. The middle module was to be the control module, supplying the 8-yard tracks as a single rail blocked section for de-energizing DC trains or DCC trains with sound and or track-powered passenger car lighting to prevent power supply overloading. With double table wide rows, the yard could be mounted backwards, placing the yard controls toward the front, and or single length modules can be placed between the corners. This also places the 6 tracks on the red track. Regardless, the double crossover single length modules allow both tracks full yard access with the yellow track power supply reverse wired to allow railroad operations on both main tracks. Why would anyone design a yard with 3/4 of the yard tracks on only one of the 2 tracks? Well, when I built my NTRAK Grayson modules, each of the 3 tracks was doubled, creating 2, 2, and 2, with the 2 red tracks mounted forward in the space between the original red track location and the front of the module set. Operators didn't like the jog, so I rerouted trains on the first yellow track, the original red track location. So, when I built my T-TRAK yard, I ran the two mains straight through. The red track was doubled by mounting the first track in the space between the red track and the front of the modules. To provide a little more room, I added 1/4 of an inch to that space by moving the red track 1/4 of an inch further back from the front of the modules. That provided a passing or setup siding. All the other tracks were added as shown. With the yellow power supply reversed and crossovers added, both tracks have access to all yard tracks as per normal railroad operations. After building the first yard, others had a desire for a much longer yard. A modeler by the name of Joshua Mura created a 7-track corner with the then new 447 480 millimeter radius curves. But I needed an 8-track corner. At the time, the 33 millimeter straights were not available, so I had to use the 29 millimeter straights. It worked with the 481 millimeter radius curves. With the move to large corners, long yards can now be only half as long. For really long yards, insulated rail joiners can be inserted between the two 90-degree 8-track corners, dividing the yard in half electrically, and a second control module added, one in the middle of each side. This would allow two trains on the same track controlled independently. The True North Rail design allows the inner curves of the 8-track corner to be 282 millimeters, the same as a standard inner corner, and the outer is 481 millimeters with the 33 millimeter straight track trick. Since a double wide row of tables is required anyway, single-length modules could be added between the corners, but one will need 8 tracks. Since a double wide row of tables is required anyway, mounting the yard straights backwards, placing the controls to the front, requires a custom length module between the 8-track corners. That module is 264 millimeters in track length. If the yard ladders are reversed, standard 282 315 millimeter corners and or Steve Jackson junctions can be used with the addition of 33 millimeter straight track pieces. A kind of another application of the 33 millimeter straight track trick. Or a pair of 64 millimeter straights can also be used. Those gap filler straight track pieces will also be required elsewhere in the layout as shown here. These are the pieces for the triple module length yard ladder puzzle. My original yard used the expansion tracks, but some folks don't like them. Since then, more optional track pieces have been added to the Cato track list. Custom cutting is always an option. Or the orange track pieces are custom trimmed, removing some of the ballast, like the 60 millimeter pieces, reducing the need for a 64 and or a 60 millimeter track piece in the row of track. This yard ladder design fits on a T-TRAK triple module. Match the trim of the 60 millimeter track pieces on any Cato straight track piece with a hobby saw. Call me paranoid, but I have a serious distrust of power routing turnouts. believe me, you don't want to change turnouts in a yard ladder or anywhere. Insulated or powered unit joiners are used as required between unit track sections. The insulated rail indications of the yard tracks also indicate the rails that are switched at the control module. The other rails are simply connected to their respective buses and not switched. Construction view, yard power from entrance to exit between the turnouts is supplied from the control module, the one with the toggle switches, through the rail joiners from module to module. The control module is placed as close to the middle of the yard as possible. Recessed row of 8 single-pole, single-throw toggle switches for single rail blocking of each of the 8 True North rail yard tracks for DC operation or to turn off power-consuming DCC trains to lessen current draw. Those unique large junction-like modules, plus the optional crossover length single modules, allow for many operational options. The yard can be considered as hidden staging, since the layout loop's outer or red track has the options of entering the yard or bypassing it. With the yard loop and layout loop inner yellow track power supply reversed, the turnouts allow all layout trains to enter the yard, and yard trains can remain in the yard as trains are switched, without impacting the layouts loops trains. As such, some opposing operation is also required, adding to operational interest. Since this junction style design can be used with any yard design or in some other layout situation, I give you this large graphic so you can determine the track pieces used. The module is 963 millimeters in track length. Next time, same thing, only different. An 8-track yard by Francesc Rianoso. A belated happy Canadian Thanksgiving, and thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Terry, for another interesting presentation on T-TRAK. Fantastic. Next up, Lee Calkins to talk about the Farragut loop in Fremo N scale. This is update number 643B, I think. Lee?
Well, 7B, but this should be the last one. And then if we have more interest, I can start a new one on other things that I've been doing with Fremo N or modular railroading in general. So
Fantastic.
So I've relabeled this one as 7B because we got our time. I went long last time, so now we can finish this. So Farragut Loop is based in Farragut, Idaho, which is now a state park. Here's the original blueprints for that were produced by the Navy back in the 1940s. Here's the module set as I have it designed, and I have it built this way. If you look here, here's a good picture that kind of shows those trees that we're going to be talking about this time. All those trees are about the same height. And so using very identical trees on this loop actually is pretty prototypical for the mid-80s of when I wanted to model it. The tracks have been gone probably since the early 1950s, but I continued to have the tracks in the area so that we could have some fun with it in a more semi-modern era. For the trees, I bought some trees on eBay that were cheap Chinese trees. They're all about the same height. There's a couple different varieties and shapes. I used some hairspray on them, and then I sprinkle some more green foam on them, and then I hairspray them again, and I sprinkle a lighter green foam that also has some other debris in it to give us some texture to the trees, so they're all not virtually identical, but they are fairly well shaped the same. So here's all the trees just thrown in a box. I did 512 or 520 trees for these 11 sections of the modules, which comes out to about 60 to 80 trees per module. Just working my way through. I probably spent days and days. Look at all the cans of hairspray in the bottom of the garbage can there. I sprayed over the garbage can, and I sprinkled the ground foam over some cans so I could reuse everything that fell off, and all the hairsprays in the garbage can so I didn't have sticky mess everywhere. So there's one of them. You can see a little bit of the highlights of the different flavors of ground foam. You can see I'm starting to get a green thumb. After an hour or two out there every night, my thumb was completely green from all the Woodland Scenics ground foam that got attached to it and bled the color out all over my skin. So there's a tray of trees that we've been making, and more trees that we've been making. And finally, we found the tree we were looking for. It's that last tree in the bottom of the box. So I went through and I figured out how many trees I had and how many sections I had, and decided we wanted about 60 trees per module. And these modules, remember, are only about 2 feet long and 1 foot wide. So that's about 30 trees per square foot. Plus we've got track in there and other things. So we started laying out the trees, figuring out where we wanted short trees and some tall trees. We've already gone through and done a bit of an understory, and we've got our ballast in on the tracks. So now we're going to start putting these trees in. I've got a piece of it's a crochet hook, for lack of a better term, that I stole from my wife, and it works great to poke holes in the ground foam and the foam, because everything, my underbase of everything is a 2-inch piece of blue foam that you can find at Home Depot or Lowe's here in the United States. And I put a little bit of white glue in the hole, and then I stick the tree in the hole, and I repeat and repeat and repeat. You get all the trees in there. So there's the first one of the curves. It's got 60 trees on there. This one has the roadbed in a fill, so the trees are going down, and they also, if we have somebody bumps the railroad, knocks a train off the tracks, it will hit the trees and stop it from hitting the ground. So that's another reason I like using these trees in this area, because that track's kind of a little closer than I like to be to the edge of the module there. Just another view of those trees that are hopefully going to catch anything if it falls off. And so I put a locomotive on the tracks just to see what we're looking at and see what it's going to look like when we're finished. We've kept the trees back from the right of way. I know in some places up here in northern Idaho, those trees are encroaching pretty close to the right of way. But we've got to be able to get in there if there's an issue, so I kept them away. So here's the industrial yard, all the ground foam's in there, the understory. I did put some understory brush and stuff between the tracks. Now we're going to start planting trees. We got 60 trees in here as well. So they're pretty tight in there because we've got a lot of trackage. And these modules are about 2.5 feet long. On the stub end track, I grabbed a couple railroad ties and I stuffed them through and stuck them underneath so we wouldn't have any cars roll off the end. The locomotive, if you recall, I purchased this locomotive and I took the motor out of it, and we are going to mount it right there on that track in the foreground, because that track goes off the edge of the layout. And we don't want anybody to push any cars onto the ground. We want to have something that'll stop the cars. So I put down some caulk there and stuck the locomotive on there. The caulk is clear caulk, and when it dries, you can't see it. The locomotive does have a little bit of a spring to it, so it can be bumped and it's not gonna break anything or fall off the tracks. And you can push on it with a locomotive in a car. The track right there also does not have track power to it. So that's, you can't get a locomotive onto it. You can get freight cars onto it. That's really why I wanted this locomotive here to stop anything from going off the edge of the module. Nobody wants to pick up a turbine off the ground, so. There's another picture of that locomotive. So over in our caboose park, remember I had all these cabooses, I wired them up, and now we're going to start setting them in place. I used caulk here as well to set these in place, and I'm using the same crochet hook, or probably not a crochet hook, I'm probably using the wrong term, someone will correct me eventually. We're poking all the wires through, and those will get wired in, so all the cabooses do have lights in them, and you can see that. There's all those cabooses. We'll slowly get them stuck in there. There's some trucks in the background that are going to get glued onto the gravel pad in the back. Working our way around, we've got all 7 cabooses in. They look really cool when it's a little bit overcast or dark out, because the lights do shine through most of the windows in those cabooses. So we haven't painted the fascia yet. I'll wait till all the scenery's on, and then I'll come back through and I'll paint the fascia black. One of my modules mates up with a module that isn't part of the Farragut loop set, and there's some taller trees on it. And I wanted to make sure that the trees I planted on my Farragut corner didn't interfere with the trees from the other module that it gets stacked to. There's only 6 inches of space between the top 45-degree module and the bottom 45-degree module, and those trees are 5 inches tall. And so I can't have any interference with those trees. So I stuck some screws in where those big trees are going to hit my other module. And then we went through and we put in little trees on that one module and made sure that there was nothing going to interfere with those other trees from the top 45-degree module. So, and then once I went through and got all the trees on, I went through and we started putting brush in there and bushes. And that's just bigger pieces of the Woodland Scenics ground foam. And after I was done with that, I went through and coated everything with the alcohol water mixture, and then dropped with an eyedropper the alcohol glue water mixture, and then came back through and sprayed it all with the water mixture to make sure everything's good and saturated. And the alcohol causes that glue to really leach out into everything and get little bits and pieces of glue on all that ground foam, because the ground foam tends to resist water penetration, but the alcohol breaks that surface tension and allows it to dissipate into the ground foam. So working my way around, getting all that brush in there. On the left-hand side is the caboose park, and so there's no big trees over there. We kept it a low brownish green grass. Step back and take a look and see where we're at right there. I've got most of it done. We've got most of the yard to do still on this photo. We got the road there in the middle for the access into the middle of the Farragut loop area. Here we're showing the yard as we come into the loop. The industrial yard is off to the left. The passenger station is directly ahead. The caboose track is, or the caboose campground's in the back there. This part of the area is kind of open now currently, and so it's not as full of trees as the other curves and stuff. The curves are really grown in right now, but this area is still open, and so I decided to leave it open on my modules. There are some sporadic trees. There's one thing I would like to do at some point. If I can find a disc golf cage and some disc golfers in N-scale, I'd love to put 1 or 2 holes along the left-hand side here, because Farragut right now has 5 really cool disc golf courses that we go play from time to time, and I'd like to incorporate that into these modules because that's something we like to do out at Farragut State Park now. So if anybody has a lead on where I can get some, probably end up being 3D printed disc golf cages, please let me know. I would love to get a 2 or 3 of them and get them on the module. So we're about ready to start putting the other vehicles on the loading dock there. This is just photos of walking around the layout and looking at all the curves and all those trees. I probably spent 30 or 40 hours decorating trees throughout this process of this module set. So there's a view of it all completed. I still gotta get the cars on there, but that's what it looks like. I had to go through and we're adjusting a couple things, fixing some ballast. I do have a friend that printed up these cool signs because we are inland Northwest Fremo Inn. And so those get a layer of caulk on the backside and then attached, and then they look really cool. And what do you do once you got your modules all done? You put some trains on them to simulate what it's going to look like. So the sidings on the industrial area will hold 2 Jeep style locomotives, 6 50-foot freight cars, and a caboose. The yard track there will also hold 6 cars. Check out what a passenger train looks at the station. Another freight train coming in. We got the other freight train in the industrial yard over there. Now, one of the things I did find out as I was going through that I ran into some problems is the dirt and the debris of ballasting the track. I didn't get it cleaned out of the switch points as well as I'd hoped. And so I had to replace the switch bars on a couple of the switches, pull out the Atlas switch bars and put in some PCB ties. That was a little frustrating for me. I've learned my lesson. The other ones I've done since then, I haven't had this problem. I've been really, really diligent about making sure that all the grit and debris is outside of out of the throw. So we had to cut new bars and get them all soldered in. I still need to go back and weather those so they blend in. They're still copper. It's been 1.5 years, almost 2 years since I put those in. I had to drill a hole so the switch rod would come up from underneath. So that's where we're at with Farragut Loop. Farragut's done. It attended the N-Scale convention in Reno in 2023. Parts of it attended the Dallas NRail convention and were part of the Operations Roadshow layout. It's been used several times here up in Spokane and Post Falls area, and it attended E24 in August or July this past summer. So I've enjoyed building Farragut Loop, and I hope that you guys can come out and see it sometimes. I'll travel with it as I can, mostly probably here in the Northwest of the United States. So thank you.
Lee, fantastic. Lee, I have a question.
Yes.
When I see that set of modules, and I've seen them in person, they're beautiful. But I get a little PTSD when I see all those trees because the first module I ever built had, a bunch of handmade trees on it where I'd cut, I think, hydrangea little stumps and gone through the flocking process just like that. And then I made all kinds of mistakes moving those things around, and they got brittle over time. And, it was just really hard to keep them looking nice. Is there something that you have to do to, I don't know, care and conditioning of these over time?
These are flexible plastic.
Hmm.
In Reno, we actually dumped the loop on its top. And so that was its first setup. We dumped a module over and crushed a bunch of the trees, and we reached over and stood them all back up because it's plastic with a metal armature in the middle. So they flex and bend right back up.
That works pretty well then.
So yeah, they're not fragile trees. I don't ever want to build fragile trees because these are modules. They're going to get manhandled and moved around. They ride in the back of my trailer. They've got probably 10,000 miles on them since I finished them 1.5 years ago. So they've been around.
Yeah. All right. So the trick is the plastic ones with a wire on the inside.
Yeah, for me it is. Yeah. We did have one problem in Evanston. One of the little switch machine mounts broke and I had to replace it before our show here. But other than that, it's been pretty non-problems. So no problems.
Okay, excellent.
I see Andy has a question.
Andy, you got a question?
He's just got his hand up and his thumb raised.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andy.
He doesn't have a question.
He doesn't have a question.
No, who makes the trees, or what brand are they?
They're a Chinese company off eBay. And then I decorated them a little more than what they came
You
in.
don't know the name of the company?
Oh,
Just
I
go,
could go-
just go on eBay and search. I think you'll see 2 or 3 different options sometime.
here. Hold on. Summary.
While he's looking for that, I'll remind anybody who's on the line today that hasn't ever built a module yet, but might be thinking about it, that as one of my friends once said, never forget that a portable module is a model railroad layout that goes for a car ride. And they do get beat up. So you have to think about that as you're designing. What do you got here?
Here's my eBay page that I watch.
Yeah.
As you can see, I'm looking at signals right now. Here's the buck converter that I used on the bottom of the modules. I keep this one marked because I buy them all the time. Here's some of the trees. So they're.
Oh, there's your even model, is it?
Yeah.
Even model.
Like that. They're dirt cheap Chinese trees. These are some of them. These aren't. I used a different variety as well that's wider, but these are the ones that I was using. So.
All right, super. All right, well, thank you very much, Lee. We appreciate it, and we've enjoyed the whole series here, so looking forward to more. All right, next up, it's Robert Utley, and a little bit of discussion around NTRAK 2.0 Revisited.
I'm a member of New Jersey Southern NTRAK, been a member since 93. So I've been around to a few shows. I'm going to try and do a share here and present. And share. Cool. So we'll go through a little bit of history first. And then we'll get up to the what I believe is NTRAK 2.0. Okay. So NTRAK 1.0 began in 1973 with Ben Davis and his desire to showcase and scale to the public while keeping things simple with a standard arrangement of tracks. With this standard, Ben and Jim Fitzgerald grew NTRAK, and many clubs from around the world began constructing NTRAK modules and layouts. In the early stages, the layouts were simple roundy round. Each track was controlled by a stationary throttle. I believe they were Lindsay throttles. We actually built them, but a power pack could work too. New Jersey Southern was one of those clubs that embraced the NTRAK 1.0 way back in the early 80s. It wasn't long after the club was established that they made end loops and started using the mountain line. We used end loops so we wouldn't have to duck under the layout to use the inside space. Like I said, I joined in 1993 after seeing the loop ends in action at a show mall show. Because our mountain division was somewhat short, we were able to use the Lindsay throttles on the tether so we can do some operation. And in the picture, you can see actually my son operating the railroad. NTRAK 1.1 was variations on 1.0, such as one track, bend track, twin track, NCAT, and T-TRAK. I even experimented with 2-track after seeing 1-track at a convention in 2004. Recent years saw the variant called Fremont. 1.2 was a variant with the way we controlled each track. We used wireless throttles like Aristocraft to control a track block. You could follow your train around and switch frequencies as you entered the next block. Hopefully, the person in front of you didn't require a lot of volts or your engine would take off like a rocket. NJS, New Jersey Southern, adopted the use of meters, and we can see what each volt was set to, or each block was set to, how many volts. In the picture, you can see I circled one of the Aristo throttles, and Jim is holding one. And in 1.3, red line route introduced in 1996. At the NTRAK East Convention in Alexandria in 1996, Northern Virginia NTRAK introduced the red line route concept. Red track was continuous around the various loops and spines of the layout, enabling a train to travel around the entire layout. The red line route has been a hallmark of larger NTRAK layouts ever since. And we can see, I believe this was in Richmond in 2002, the picture there. In, let's see, 1.4, we started with DCC in 1996. In the beginning, DCC, some clubs had both DC tracks and DCC tracks to run on. At the Young Convention in 2004, New Jersey Southern had a yard that had power routed turnouts that could be DC or DCC in the bowl. You would traverse the whole DC section of the railroad, pull into the NGS yard, move your DC engine to a storage track, and throw a switch, and couple your DCC engine and traverse the DCC section of the railroad. I think the trip around the whole layout was over 2 hours. We also did it at NTS 2006 in Philadelphia. So we'll run a little video here. I hope. Here it goes. Oh, you guys can't see it. Maybe. There you go. So as you can see, the train, this is a DC train. It pulls into the yard and goes onto the blue and gets stored away. Then we bring our DCC power in, couple up to the cars, and we traverse the rest of the layout on DCC. And this is all done through power routing. Power routing of the yard. Oh, that's what I want to do. Okay, so 1.5 in 1998, and saw JMRI, that's Java Model Railroad Interface, free software that makes programming, locomotives, layout control, and setting layout parameters fairly easy. Well, it's kind of easy anyway. A little bit of practice, you can get there. Used initially for programming locomotives and setting layout parameters, used for turnout operations, signals, etc., used for monitoring layout operations. 1.6, first major change to the original NTRAK standard, power poles, connectors, and 12-gauge bus wire. The 12-gauge zip wire with Anderson power poles, 30 amp connectors, less voltage drop through the layout, more reliable, lower cost than Cinch Jones connectors, and larger electrical districts. Truly wireless DCC throttles that can be freely operated operate engines anywhere on the track on the layout. T-TRAK simplex, T-TRAK duplex, Wi-Fi for smartphones and tablets. Total freedom of train control. And you could have head-on collisions, of course. And you can run into the back of people too. Happens all the time. The operators choose his preferred throttle type, and then away you go. And then 1.8 wireless accessories and sound decoders. ESU T-TRAK sound decoders for engines, stationary decoders to operate turnouts with your throttle. New Jersey Southern uses signal boxes with the turnout number on them so operators can throw their own turnouts. Please normalize turnouts after passing it. 2.0. So what is NTRAK 2.0? Up until I was asked to present this article for ZoomTrak, I wasn't really sure. I read the 4 NRail newsletters John Wallace recommended, and what I came away with is, at the very least, NTRAK 2.0 is a layout with legacy modules running DCC and power poles with continuous running trains. It's basically it. Could be a roundy round, loop to loop. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have Fremont with its very open style module arrangements. At Fort Worth, Texas, 2004, all 3 types of N-scale variants were combined, NTRAK, T-TRAK, and Fremont. In between these extremes are combined club layouts like ENL, Eastern End Lines, that utilize module multiple loops, or balloon ends, as sometimes they're called, and red line route, and all DCC controlled tracks. We also have operating sessions on JM using JMRI. So this picture is the last time we were in the Pepsi building in Danville. It was designed by Dave Beasley in 22. So I believe NTRAK 2.0 is more than just about tracks and controls and layout styles. It's also about all the great scenery product manufacturers have made available in N-scale that we can use on our modules. It's about cool LED lights we can use in our street lights and buildings, and LEDs to tell which way the turnouts are thrown. New tree products to make the trains look even better as they traverse the module. It's about 3D printing structures and vehicles to make your modules truly unique. It's also about the great new locomotives and rolling stock from manufacturers like Scale Trains, Atlas, and many others. For me, NTRAK 2.0 is about the way the modules look and the way the layout flows and the way trains sound and move through scenes. It's about having reliable DCC and power poles and track work. It's about squeezing as many modules as possible into a space and have room for people to enjoy the railroad. And this one I designed for the new location for Danville and the Amtrak station. It's pretty tight in there, but with the different loops and corners, and it all worked out. This is the second year we're in the basement, and everybody seems to enjoy the layout. So what's next? What's going to be NTRAK 3.0? Could it be battery-powered wireless engines? We got them in G-scale. Of course, G-scale actually, you can fit batteries in there. Easy touchpads for turnout controls or route selection. JRMI has the ability to do that now. Signals that operate throughout the layout? Maybe, but that would require the train operators to pay attention to their trains. And that's about all I got for this one. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Bob. I would like to just agree with what you said at the end, if I may, and maybe even paraphrasing. You showed us a lot of evolutionary history from the very beginnings of NTRAK. Most of those were technical upgrades and specifications along the way that went from sort of 1.0 through all the iterations. I too think, Bob, that when I asked myself what NTRAK 2.0 is about, it's not entirely clear to me, but one of the things that's on my mind is how do we recapture the enthusiasm and the passion that I think was evident in the mid 70s. In the mid 70s, NTRAK was created to show off something that people hadn't seen, right? In a whole new and different kind of way, to bring railroading out of the basement or the attic and bring it to shows in a way that I suspect, even though I wasn't there, lots of train show participants would have just been blown away. And the enthusiasm and the passion around that. I do see an analogy today when I participate in Free-Mo-In layouts, because there's a whole lot, because it's relatively new. A lot of people are young at it, and there aren't as many rules. It feels a little bit like you can sort of make it up as you go. I'm interested to know what other people might think about that, but I think I agree with Bob that NTRAK 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever it is, we'll continue to have these technological changes. But what we really need to be thinking about, I think, is the experience that we're providing to people who come to shows, for ourselves and for the audience, if you will. What does it look like and feel like to people? Because our job, and I think the job of NRail is to expose people to model railroading, to N-scale model railroading, and to N-scale modular model railroading in ways that we get more people jazzed up about the hobby we all love. Any questions? Any thoughts from our audience today about 2.0 or 3.0 or what comes next? Bruce, looks like we're a little bit ahead of schedule today. Should we put the poll up now, or?
Yeah, I'll
Oh,
go
yeah.
ahead and launch the poll. So that people can respond. I think one of the really important breakthroughs that's going to occur is once we can get batteries that are small enough to fit into N-scale. I think, I can remember back, I think it was in the 80s when we had analog remote control before the digital era, and it took an entire B unit to house all the controls for running an engine. So you always had to have an A and a B unit, or put your controls in a large tender. And I'm trying to remember the name of the company we used, but it escapes me right now. I think once we hit another.
It was Dynatrol.
Dynatrol, that's right. Yep. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Abbott Lady out of Cambridge was was the person who engineered that, and being located at that time in close by in New England,
Yeah.
using his product was something that our club started doing. And but it was kind of clunky, and then DCC came along, and that has really revolutionized all of model railroading. And I think that, the dead rail or the battery powered engines is going to be
Yeah.
the
That could be.
big breakthrough for N scale.
Yeah. I saw a presentation earlier this year. Who was the fellow's name? He presented at the N scale convention about the future. And one of the things he pointed out was that model railroading, because it's a small hobby, it's not a big economic driver. If you look back on the history of it, it's rarely been at the forefront of innovation. Things don't get invented typically in our hobby, but what happens is that people see innovation and invention in other aspects of our world, and they say, hey, I can make that work in the model railroading space.
Right.
And one of the things that's happening more broadly, in our world is that batteries are getting smaller and smaller all the time. I think we all kind of know and understand that to some degree. But what he talked about that I didn't know about was this technology about forming a battery to fit any kind of shape, so that it's way, way more flexible in terms of the kind of shapes. And where we do see a little bit of that, like like in a full-size vehicle today, an electric car, where the battery is actually a part of the frame. And his postulation was, that's the innovation we need, right? If the frame of an N-scale locomotive was the battery, then you wouldn't have this kind of sort of space problem that we would have today. And so maybe so. And then part of it is about having the right kind of technology so that it supercharges. But as he pointed out, which I thought was interesting, is what if you had to take your engine over to the diesel fueling facility and let it sit there for 15 minutes? That'd be pretty prototypical. And what it would be doing is supercharging for the next run around the layout. So, yeah, boy, anybody who's ever, and probably 75% of the people on the line have spent more time than they wanted to fixing electrical issues or cleaning track. Battery power could revolutionize things for us.
One of the other neat things that is coming to light more and more is with the use of what we saw in 2.0, where you have loops. What we've done is we've made our loop go out on the red and come back on the yellow as our red line route.
Yeah.
And then we've reserved the blue line, which is where most of your sidings are. And we use that for operations. Operations is becoming more and more prevalent. People traveling around the country to operations weekends and that sort of stuff. And now we can do that. At least our club can do that. It shows with a junction module and a loop, dead end loop with a loop around the end of it, where the blue line is for operations. You can leave the yard in the main loop, come out, get over to the blue line and operate, and then head back. And that adds that whole other dimension that entices a lot of people more than just running round and round, whether it's in one loop and out the other or whatever.
I think you're so right, Razor. I have been involved a couple of times with N-scale groups who had a desire to do that, but didn't really know exactly how to get to the next step. So I think that is something we continue to want to explore. And for those of you who, I guess if you're an operator already, you probably get that. And if you're not an operator, you might want to try it. Those of us who like operations a lot, after a while, you sort of look at a setup without operations. It's kind of like a Monopoly board that's all been set up, but nobody's touching it. So, yeah, the idea of operations, I think, is especially as it pertains to being able to show that, I think, and demonstrate that to people who come to shows, or let other people participate. I think you're right. I think I mentioned in a previous ZoomTrak too, I'm a part of Northeast NTRAK, which has been around now for 40 plus years. And I've been involved with it for 15 or so. And we kind of, in a way, have just discovered this year how much fun it is to have loops. We've pretty much been a roundy club for a couple of decades, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the layouts can be bigger, but there's also all of that anxiety that comes along with who's going to show up and are we going to have enough of the right pieces and all that. And we've had several shows now where we just have had these balloon in loops and things, and like Razor just described, and well, that makes it a lot of fun. Steve, got your hand up, and then I'll come to Bob afterwards. Just have to get yourself off mute, Steve. Maybe not. Let me go to Bob Schaefer.
Okay, I've written some software to facilitate T-TRAK operations. And if we treat the main line, the red line in a T-TRAK layout as a main line, then we can have some operations related modules that we intersperse in there. And what you can do then is have a true operations session the way you would in a normal operating layout. Now, the key to it is being able to do it quickly. You set up a T-TRAK layout, you're never sure exactly where the modules are going to be. You're not sure which ones are going to be there. But the software I've written takes care of that problem. It takes less than an hour to go from a completed layout to having bidirectional traffic. Now, admittedly, you're going to have to bend some rules a little bit, but you can have two-way traffic with meets on T-TRAK. All you need some passing sidings, of course.
Yeah.
But the actual op session can be designed so quickly that that you don't have to worry so much about the exact placement. Guys spend years developing an ops session.
Yeah.
We have, like I said, I can do it in an hour. And I'm trying to promote the concept, the idea. I gave a clinic in Long Beach. I was going to do something again in Ocala, but unfortunately the Hurricane Milton interfered with that. But I think, and I saw Andy was here. I don't know if he can speak to this. But we can really do much more with ops than simple roundy round.
Have you given that clinic yet on ZoomTrak, Bob?
No, I haven't. I've done it in a couple of other places. But
so what the hell's wrong with you?
Andy, what's wrong with me?
Bob, is that software available?
It's under
sharing it or what?
Yes, it will be available for free on my club's website. It's still under development. I confess that. But I've got it to the point where I'm producing track warrants and string diagrams.
Wow.
And we can do it. Is possible to do.
Well, if you'd like to do even a work in progress kind of, here's what I'm working on and here's where it is, I think we'd love to have you do something like that here on ZoomTrak.
Next month.
Well, I'm not.
Bruce is smiling.
I'll get in touch with you.
Hey, Razor.
He's got you though. Fantastic. Other questions, comments?
JMRI has a great operating program built into it.
Yeah.
I use it a lot. I've used it for about 4 or 5 years now. So every time we have E&L down in Danville, I use
Okay. Use the JMRI.
and I'm getting maybe 14 or 15 trains together and shuffling them all over the place and everything. So it's really pretty cool once you get it set up.
Only thing that you have to be careful of when you start operations on at a show is you've got to have your pins underneath your trucks painted in your colors and identified so you can get your stuff back at the end if it's scattered all over the layout.
That's true. And I usually bring 2 boxes of trains that I already have the numbers already programmed into the system and everything. So whoever does operation is using my cars. And I paint each one of the cars on the bottom, the pins, so nobody can get them mixed up. All you got to do is bring your engine and ask for a job, and I give it to you, and you go out. But one thing I should mention, though, is that we don't really do ops at big shows like in Amherst because there's just too much public and just too much going on with it. So usually it's a smaller shows I try to do that with.
Yeah, what I think is that we could do it at a large show if we wanted to. And relatively not all day sessions, more like a 2-hour session twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
But it would work. The problem is getting enough modules that have an operation focus. The rest of it is pretty straightforward.
Bob, the question came up, what club is it that you belong to?
Green Valley Railroad Club. It's available now. It isn't complete. And my algorithm for figuring the aftermath of meets, I had to revise, and I'm reworking it now. Because every time you have a meet, everything shifts down due to the waiting times.
Fantastic.
It's down to the one question. What are we going to call that? 2.74 or what?
Sounds fun. We'll have you on in the couple of or in the next month or two or whatever the schedule says, and
okay,
you can show us a little bit about what you have. And,
yeah, I put my information in the chat. Not in the chat, but in the survey.
Fantastic, super.
Great.
All right, we're a little past the top of the hour, so I think we've had another good Saturday session.
Yep.
Appreciate everybody coming and sharing a little bit of your time with us. And we will see you right here next month at the same time on the same channel.